One of my many roles here at Aetherna Games is the role of level designer. I've done the level design for 3 of our games at this point, and I think at this point I've done some pretty good stuff as well. I'm pretty proud of the levels I've made, and whilst they may not win like level design awards, I don't even know if that's a thing, they have taught me a bunch of things as well throughout development. I've done a bunch of level design live streams as well, where it's just like me on stream talking about level design and things like that. And I get a bunch of questions as well, like, hey, how do you approach level design? Do you have some tips and all of that basically? So I just want to go over that in this video, talk about 5 things that I've learned throughout like my level design career, whatever. Also from things I picked up from like some level design books and things like that, that I wanted to share with you guys. Because level design, at the end of the day, depending on the genre, it can be a pretty substantial part of the game that can make or break basically the entire flow of your game and how good your game mechanics can actually come to fruition. And I think keep in mind as well that this is advice coming from someone who isn't just a full-time level designer, because you can go very in-depth and you have like the white box stage and you go gray box and you go and fill it in or whatever. That is like the optimal approach to level design, of course, but you want to release games at some point as well. And I had that mix of, well, we need speed as well. We need to be able to go fast. For unicycle pizza time, that level was made in like 3 or 4 days. We had to go really fast there. So how do you start with level design? You go and you start high level. That's always how I think you should begin. Go and think high level. How do you want the flow of your level to be? You can do this on paper. You can do there like a little drawing or whatever. Or what I've done in certain cases as well for unicycle pizza time is I just laid out the big main road structure that I wanted the level to have. I was like, okay, I want to have this area, I want to have this area, I want to have this area, and now we just connect all of them. I like wrote down, okay, we need to have a park area, I want to have a marketplace, I want to have a road with busy traffic and whatever, and we just combined all of them and put them together. Always have this high level overview. We did something similar for Overtime Anomaly, where I knew that, okay, we wanted to give kind of like an H shape for how you move throughout the level, and we needed to have all of these specific rooms. We just threw together, it's very shitty in Photoshop, I'll put it up right now. We threw together an initial version, and then from then on, I moved on to the engine. And then once again, I started by laying out the main roads and then filled up room by room everything after that. I think this is by far the best way, and this is very limited, of course. Like I said, like this is not like first white boxing, then gray boxing and all of that. This is using asset packs. This is not making all of the models from scratch, because we don't have the time for that, we don't have the budget for that, and you probably don't have it either. But it gives a good idea immediately of, okay, how is the complete flow going to be of my entire level? Like, even if it's not completely filled and whatever, you want to start high level. There's another like school, but I don't think it's really that good, where you start like literally from the beginning and you kind of go at the seat of your pants. How should you go? Like you start with start area and then go to the next area and all of that. I don't suggest that because of the second thing. Your start area is always going to be the worst part of your game, basically. So leave that to the end. And okay, this may sound weird, but the first time that you're making a level for your game, it's probably going to be at the start, right? That you're going to start. It's going to be where your player spawns, and then you have that long-term vision of, okay, I want to have these roads and things like that. But you start with the start area, and you like maybe try and dress it up a little bit nicely, because you're like, okay, I'm going to look at this a lot of times, because when you start the game for debugging or whatever, you're immediately going to be in a pretty area. And then you keep developing on your game. And even if you're a level design god, you'll realize that for each game, there are different intricacies and there's different ways you make said level that you will get better at throughout the level design process. Because it's not something you do in like 2 hours. It's something that does normally take like a week or even more of time to do the level design. And you need to realize that if you start with the start area for your game and then you keep learning basically, you're going to have a problem where the final areas of your game, like the later stages, are going to be much like feel higher quality, because you also just understand better, you've had more training of how am I going to do this level design. And it can be really bad then, because you don't want the final end of your game to be good. You want the beginning to be good. Like you want everything to be good, of course. But for a lot of players, they will never reach the end. Whereas if the beginning first stage already isn't good, they're going to want to tap out and they'll never even see the end of your game. So what I suggest is, okay, you make that start area first and it's like, okay, whatever. But mentally, you already prepare yourself on completely deleting the start area and then restarting all over again once you've done the rest of the level. Like the final piece of level design you do for your game, like the final piece, so to say, that you're not going to be changing anymore, should always be your start area. Your start area should be the most polished area of the game. You have like other approaches like, oh, start the level backwards. Like you start with the end of the level design, like the final level, and then you'll work your way backwards, and then you'll end up at the start. And normally the start should always be the most polished part of your game, really, because that is what people will interact with the most. Do not put all of your skill and talent into the final area of the game, and then the start of the game was just something you threw together in 15 minutes so you had like an actual piece of ground for your character to stand on. You need to give the start the most love you can give. Another thing, and this kind of goes back to that first thing when you work high level, is that it's important for your level to have different colors, or like maybe not a single level, but like your game should have different colors throughout it. It can be very easy to, let's say, make everything a sci-fi tech base where everything is gray. The problem is it's just boring. It's not interesting, it's not visually stimulating, and people are going to get sick of that. You want to add a lot of color variation throughout your level. You can do this relatively easy often with like certain areas. I think, for example, if you look at Unicycle Pizza Time once again, there are areas that is just regular streets with like red brick houses and then gray floors, and then we add parts that are, for example, parks where there is suddenly a green ground and we have some water and whatever, and then we change the environment multiple times throughout the level to keep things feeling fresh. I think that's an important thing. People like your level for like 10 minutes and then they're gonna be sick of it. Then you kind of need to reinvent part of the level, you need to change something, you need to change the dynamic, or you need to change the color. Also, this is going to help with marketing as well. This is a kind of a side tangent. But in your trailer, for example, you often want to showcase multiple colors of your game. So for example, there's a red biome, there's a green biome, and there's a blue biome, like 3 main colors in your trailer, because it also shows that there is more to the game than just one level, because you have all of these different environments to play your game with, and your player is going to become more interested. It also helps with navigation, because it's much easier to realize where am I. If everything in your level, especially if it's more of like a closed first person kind of game, if everything is just gray hallways, it's not really easily distinguishable of, oh, I should go that way, I should go that way. And then it's like, yeah, I can add a mini map, but that, depending on the genre, can be kind of not really fitting. Visual cues and like making your level as diverse as possible while still making sense in the overall picture and scope of your game is going to be an important thing. Even if you're making a sci-fi tech base, have like a hydroponics plant that is like more green, for example, or have like a spooky laboratory where all of the colors and all of the lights are like an amber, for example. Those are things as well to break up the single solid color that you have throughout your entire game. You don't want to do that. You want to instead keep it stimulating, keep it visual all the time. And then speaking of color and stimulating and visuals, this is maybe a bit of a hot topic, but I think you should use it, is yellow paint. Don't forget about the yellow paint. What do I mean with yellow paint? This is something, I think it's in like the Tomb Raider games that got some flack for it, depending on like the difficulty you had, or I think Final Fantasy as well had this. Depending on the difficulty you selected, there was like yellow paint on the walls to really highlight the player, this is where you should go. And yellow paint exactly could be maybe lazy level design, you could consider it like that, but at the end of the day you need to have a good flow where it makes sense for the player where to go. A lot of indie developers, when they're starting out, they're like, I'm gonna make an open world game like Zelda. The problem is, if you make an open world, there often isn't really a good explanation of what should the player do next, and then they'll just walk around kind of lost and they don't really know how to advance the quest, how to advance the game. And sure, maybe you have a pretty game and like they can look around for like 10 minutes, but at some point they're probably going to want to actually save the world or whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing. Yellow paint is like a really in-your-face way to say, go this way, this is where the main quest is. Now, you don't want to railroad your player too much, of course, but good level design will almost organically, even if it's an open world, funnel the player to the right direction, basically, where you can technically go anywhere you want, but you know, like, hey, I'm probably gonna want to go there. Even in games that may seem completely obvious where you need to go, like for example, Unicycle Pizza Time again, where it's literally just a single street you have to follow, even then, when you look at like people play the game, often it's like, I don't know where to go. So we use things like environmental storytelling. I don't know if that's probably not the right term, of like road signs with like arrows on it, or like, you know, those neon signs with arrows, and those highlighted as well of this is where you need to go. It's maybe not as in your face because it's not literally yellow paint, but it still showcases, okay, this is something you need to pay attention to. Lighting is another one that can help a lot. Like a certain pathway is going to be more lit than other areas of your level, for example. So you're going to stick and follow the light. There's a lot of creative approaches, like the yellow paint should really be your last effort thing, I think, because gamers do recognize it and it does feel maybe a bit cheap at times. But there is a lot you can do in terms of making your game more structured and going into a single direction. Even really good open world games often still kind of want to funnel you into a certain direction so you just don't wander around lost the entire time. I know Skyrim is like, yeah, you can play Skyrim for like 100 hours without ever touching the main quest if you really wanted to, but you're not making Skyrim. You're not like a team of 100 writers and all of that. So don't look at those games and be like, I'm gonna be just like them. And then a final piece of advice that I have, and this is mainly applicable if you're not making first-person games, is don't forget about the camera. It can be really obvious when you're making like a third-person game, like, oh, I'm gonna put a hallway here, or I'm gonna put a wall here, or whatever. We did this with Unicycle Pizza Time, where there's like multiple areas where you have to go in through a corner. And I didn't think about the fact that we have a third-person camera that is hovering behind you. And the problem you have then is that the camera kind of clips through the wall, or it gets stuck in like the head of the character because it's like bouncing off of it. Your camera is actually going to be more important sometimes than your player, because it's like I can lose the player, but the camera should always be visible to the actual person playing the game. It should be clear what they're doing, what they're looking at, and if suddenly everything is going to be obstructed by some boxes or a wall or whatever, they don't know what they're doing, they're playing the game blind, and it's something that you can sometimes forget about, especially in those tight and closed spaces. And you need to think about, okay, how am I going to handle my camera then? Is it going to go on an angle? Is it going to be offset? Is it going to zoom in closer to the player, for example? Am I going to switch to a full-on first-person view? There's a lot of approaches you can do here. Similarly to, for example, top-down games. What if my character is like hidden behind a tree and all of that? Those are things to keep in mind as well. Like the level design for your character is one thing, but you as a player need to be able to understand how the level looks at all times. So don't just make a game assuming that your character is going to be playing in first person if it's not playing in first person. Your camera takes up physical space as well, and you don't want to have it like jump around and jitter just to make sure that your camera stays visible. There's a lot of approaches you can do here. I can't give you a simple answer because it depends on the style of game you're making and all of that, but keep your camera more in mind, I think, sometimes than your player. How easy is it for your camera to get stuck behind walls and all of that, basically? So those were some tips that I have already in terms of level design. Maybe I'm curious, are there some that you've learned along the way as well? How much level design do you honestly even do for your game? Because I think if you're making like strategy games, you don't really have to worry about it as much. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, so leave them in the comments down below as well. Apart from that, if you're new here, we make videos about game development and the things that we've been learning along the way. If that's something that you're interested in, be sure to head down below and subscribe, because we upload these videos twice a week. I get happy because the number of subscribers goes up and you'll be notified the moment that these videos go live. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!